Welcome back to another episode of Final Form with me, Amish Patel. Thank you so much for tuning in. So today I'm joined by two special guests with me. One is Yacin Marzouki and one is Dan Buckland. I'm going to throw it straight over to both of you guys. So Yacin, first introduce yourself.
Okay, great. Thanks, Amish. Thanks for having me on the show. So I'm Yacin, last name Marzouki. I've been in pharma for a few years now, but right now I work for an Italian top pharma company, but I don't say who it is, just for my editorial liberty. If it wasn't straightforward enough, as the words are coming through my mouth, everything that I say is my own point of views and opinions. So hence why my employer is a bit of a secret, while it's not really a secret. So I was lucky enough to actually, before my current employer, be in a situation where I worked for a kind of startup-ish biotech, in the sense that we transitioned from an R&D company to a commercial organization. So it really gave me the chance to work on very vast projects where we didn't have a CRM, so we had to start everything from scratch. We didn't have a single HEP portal. No one was sending emails. We didn't have rep teams, etc. So we really set up everything from scratch. And then to finish my intro, an important aspect of me is that I started my career actually back in the day in manufacturing. So I really have a very big love and appreciation for operational excellence and getting things done until the end, because I worked in automotive and you cannot sell a half-finished car, which is often what we do in pharma. So how do we actually finish the car or the content or whatever we're doing and delivering it to the customer so that the customer can do what it's intended for example, driving from point A to point B. And I'll hand over to you, Dan.
Thanks. Yeah, good intro. I'm Dan. I am the agency director for medical marketing and communications agency Brandcast Health. And yeah, just a little bit about me. I am really obsessed and I love content marketing, content strategy and delivery. Like that's my big passion. But also similar to Yacin, I like to make sure things are done. So I have a big passion for being hands-on with marketing and really as a marketeer, understanding every aspect of the journey, like understanding the CRM, understanding the web portal, understanding the emails and the whole ecosystem. And for me, that's the most important part and something that I like to talk about a lot. So yeah, pleasure to be here.
Love it. Thanks very much for your introductions there. I want to get straight into a specific term, which I think recently I've been speaking to a lot of people about, and I had this at a conference I went to last week as well, which is the word omnichannel. And I think, Yacin, you have this in your job title. So I just want to throw it to you almost, first of all. What do you feel about this word? Are you still using it? And what does that mean to you? Because context to that question as well. So recently when I've been speaking to people, they kind of said that feel like that word is a bit taboo and they're no longer wanting to mention it. It's more like customer engagement, for example, and they're kind of referring to it as the O word. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, unfortunately, I share that feeling. It's a word I'm not particularly fond of. I would even say I hate it at times because there's a very big misconception about what omnichannel is. So I very often also refer to myself or to what I do as a customer engagement lead or customer engagement, because that's what it's about. If then you achieve it through multi-channel, omnichannel, or even single channel, for me, the focus is on message delivery. And recently, a colleague even called me a postman for that, because my obsession is on getting the message to the customer. And actually, that also then ties to my mission, because my mission is to get that message to the customer. Why? Because we want HCPs to make the most informed prescribing decision possible. If we don't do that, if one day I'm a patient or my mom or whoever in my vicinity, I want them to get the treatment that is most fit for purpose, not the one of the loudest shouter or the one with the biggest booth. It's about the HCP being armed to make the most informed prescribing decision. And then however you get that message across is actually what matters. And that's why with omnichannel, actually, the fact that even channel is in the word is something wrong, because you start focusing on the channel already instead of the message. So that's a bit where I stand around that word.
Yeah, I love that. I remember, I think you posted something a while ago and we got into a bit of a debate around kind of channel message formats and all of that as well. So we can definitely dive into that a bit when we talk about content. And same question to you, but also an add-on, because I think you sparked a debate recently around kind of competencies versus having these omni-channel functions in terms of having those competencies in all roles within the pharma company. So it'd be great to kind of get your thoughts and maybe kind of elaborate on what you meant by some of that.
Yeah, so I mean, I would echo what Yacin said and what you said, but I think like I don't like the word is taboo for me, and like, but we all use it, right? Because I'll probably on our agency website it will say that we can do omni-channel, because that's what everyone wants, and we do in a job as well. You have an internal persona to sell, and omni-channel is popular and required, so you do it, right? But I like that you said, Yacin, it's the word channel, and I couldn't figure out what it is that I don't like about it. But I think that is what it is. What it comes down to is people then focus on it's all about connected lots of channels. Like it's all about the channels, and it doesn't really matter. Like for me, like you shouldn't be aiming for an omni-channel excellence. You should be aiming for a goal. And if the goal is to ensure that each healthcare professional understands enough information about your product in order to use it in the correct situation, then there are loads of different techniques and tools. It could be one channel, could be specific channels, could be specific types of content. Like it's all about your kind of strategy and engagement. So again, I feel like the focus on omnichannel means that you just then focus on trying to understand what that is rather than the actual impact or the customer need that you're trying to address. So for me, yeah, I find it difficult. On the skill gap, I think that's very closely tied to this idea of omnichannel. So I did a post recently about well, it came from the fact that a lot of people who I see in omnichannel roles, like Yacin, like they're the ones that have this idea that we need to be a bit more customer first, and they maybe have a little bit more understanding, whether it's because of the background or the type of people that get hired into the role, they have a bit more understanding of what it means to actually create a practical marketing ecosystem, which channels to use, what content will resonate, compared with your traditional pharma brand manager or marketing team, where the focus is very much, well, this is our creative, these are our core messages, and we always do these assets. So my role is to make sure that I can communicate as often and as far as possible about what my product does. And I think that like this is the difference. I see that these people in the omnichannel roles end up not actually trying to orchestrate omnichannel within the business. What they take up, they spend all their time basically sort of trying to sort out really basic things like, okay, here's how to do an email structure. Like here's how to do a basic welcome journey of 3 emails when someone subscribes to your website. Here's a sort of form that you might put into your website that helps you generate leads. Here's how to make this message more customer centric. So they end up basically just teaching basic marketing to brand managers. And so that's my issue with the fact that we've introduced it as a role. And it means that what you end up is you've actually effectively trying to solve an engagement problem by introducing a role rather than inherently changing the way that the company and brand teams do things. Like, so that's my issue. I feel like it's a lazy way to try and solve an engagement problem, which I think is vast. So that's why I posted about it. And yeah, like I think there's lots of varied opinions. I think, some people will get offended that I don't think omnichannel should be a specific function because they see the value in it, which I also do. But then other people, I think, recognize the unmet need that we have within classic traditional brand teams, which is that it's not real marketing, in my opinion. It's kind of brand, what I would call brand marketing, like brand management. So yeah, that's like kind of why I focused on that topic. I don't know if Yacin, you have any views on those roles.
Absolutely, and I would also love to hear Amish's opinion, actually, even as a host. But to me, the omnichannel role should sit within the brand team and have common deliverables. Because I'm working on a post on this, but it's such a vast subject that even I'm stuck for now. So I'll try to share my thoughts, but they're not fully polished yet. But why should the omnichannel representative sit within the brand team? Because as you said, Dan, actually, we need to bring that expertise that sits within those teams classically and only to those teams. Because let's be honest, most of the marketeers that we have are usually people that transition from a sales function into a marketing function. Most of the sales reps, even though some of them have business acumen, also transition from a scientific role. We have a lot of pharmacists that actually become sales reps and then transition into a marketing role, but they don't necessarily have the expertise. And the moment they do have expertise, in any case, like in many industries and companies, if you're above average, then you get promoted to the next title and you lose actually that expertise within the team. But the accountability then of each person would be that the marketing responsible is responsible for the content and the messaging. Same for the medical representative, medical advisor, medical director, whoever it is that then sits within that team. But then the omnichannel person is the one that is responsible for making sure that that content uses in the right channel, if you want to go to channels anyways. And why is channel important? Because for me, channels do have a value, but more in the product lifecycle. For example, classical example, in your launch phase, you should do a lot of webinars. Why? Because webinars will allow you, one, to build brand awareness, but also if you do it right, and for me, it's a Tony subject, achieve thought leadership. If you consistently for a very long time own a specific message, but webinars are lead generating activity. That's why you do them, to actually get the email addresses, build your first party mailing list, get insights on who was highly engaged, lowly engaged, etc. And even the interpretation then of the webinar data is something that in theory mostly or only sits with the webinar, omnichannel role. And so advising on the content and how we get that content to the HCP or in front of the HCP would then be the role, and the full team would be accountable for that. And then also setting the goals of, we create a deliverable, a specific output, a specific piece of content. Now I'm speaking in a global context. How many HCPs do we want to have exposed to that content? How are we going to measure it? And who's accountable for what part? Because that's where very often it falls off. If we again take the webinar example, who will invite people to that webinar? And then as a global function, usually we don't have a first party mailing list because the rights, even if people would register for that webinar, still sits with the local entity, or the local entity doesn't want us to communicate with those HCPs directly without them being aware. And so all of that then needs to be coordinated by the omnichannel role. And if we don't have that, it often falls into the gray zone. We know that gray zones tend to become black holes. No one takes accountability or responsibility. And we just pat ourselves on the back. Yeah, we delivered the webinar with this specific organization as medical. We're happy. We had our deliverable. We did great scientific output. No one watched it, but who cares? Because we don't even care about how many people watched it. From a marketing point of view, it's then a medically led activity. They don't really feel accountable. But that's why we need to, with common brand teams, common goals, need to break down the silos. I know it sounds a bit cheesy, the breaking down silos sentence. But as long as we don't achieve that, as long as we don't have 3 different functions being responsible for the same target and also being held accountable for that, for example, 20 subject through a bonus or to your individual targets, I don't think that will happen. And if your only goal as an omnichannel or customer engagement lead is to build channels and making sure that emails are being sent, then we will not move the needle. And as said, the driver is we need to get that information to the HCP so they can make the most informed prescribing decision possible. So it's really a huge responsibility because there are people out there who live with a disease that cannot achieve remission, people that potentially die because they don't get the right treatment. And that's how we should look at this, because we have a huge responsibility as individuals working in this industry of getting this treatment in front of the right patient at the right time, to then do an analogy with the omnichannel definition. But Amish, I'm also curious about your opinion here.
Yeah, wow, so much to unpack between you guys there. So yeah, quite a few things. I think probably should have taken notes as you guys both were talking, but like I think the first thing was around like that channel aspect you guys covered. So I was thinking about that, and actually, I guess being in one of these roles and teams back when it was multi-channel, that was trending, and I think it still happens now. Is that because of that team be sitting separately, you do end up, it sounds like, and it definitely feels like it, you become a platforms team, like you said. And so whilst you've got those good intentions of helping the brand team as such orchestrate those customer journeys and plan a proper sequence, actually you end up kind of troubleshooting or putting things through channels and like you mentioned, Dan, around like trying to get people to do simple email journeys, for example. Whereas actually, if you're maybe sitting in the team and the whole omni-channel role or the customer engagement role is maybe built around capability building, so building those skills on the job with the brand teams, I think maybe that's a better use of time. And the platforms, you shouldn't need local people in local countries to really look after platforms. Everyone in the company, every affiliate, every country, etc., is using pretty much the same platforms, and they should work. Everything should be set up in the same way. So they shouldn't need teams like that to do that. And so I think if we can switch those roles towards more capability building roles and embed them in the organization, then I think there is a place for these roles to make sense. So that's kind of one thing I was thinking. And then the other thing I was thinking, again, based on experience, was around like the budgets. So often, as we talked about, these omnichannel or customer engagement teams, for example, again, they're orchestrating or planning out these great jobs, great sequences for customers, yet actually they don't have any budget to do it or any power to influence really what the brand team ultimately does. And so whilst they can suggest these great things, pull up, spend their time looking at data and building all these things, actually the brand team will go and do what they're going to go and do because they've already committed their budget to something way in advance as well. So yeah, there are a couple of things I was thinking.
I think it's that, the thing for me is like the team, the way the team is built is like the team needs to have a goal. So if you're trying to achieve something, what team do you need within, like, working together day to day to achieve that goal? Instead of thinking we have these different departments and verticals and they're all responsible for different aspects across all brands. So, working on a particular therapy area or portfolio or even one specific brand is like, who do you need within that team? Okay. Like, probably, like, I would throw away the aspect of medical and marketing in this. I know, like, I'm just thinking of from scratch. If I was to think from scratch, who do I need in my team? For sure, I want someone deep medical knowledge on the topic, understands the therapy area, understands what trials are happening, what healthcare professional opinion is. I want that in there. Probably I want someone who is responsible for collecting and understanding insights on a regular basis. So whether that's from field teams, whether that's from data that we're getting from third party, or whether that's from CRM, just regularly feeding the team with knowledge and information about customers and how they're interacting. You're going to want someone who's got oversight of the marketing plan and the strategy. You're going to want someone who has the technical capability to brief in development, brief in agencies, to run CRM integrations and things. And then does that, can one person cover multiple roles? Can one person do multiple things, or do you need a separate person for each? Maybe end up with a team of 5 or 6, depending on the size of the brand, and then those people can work together to deliver. And then, yes, centrally, you've got like a head of Omnichannel who directly line manages each person within those team kind of vertically. But you're kind of like, you're starting to create teams that achieve objectives rather than people with roles and responsibilities. And I like, just culturally, it makes a big difference, because you're then a team working together with lots of different skills to achieve a common goal, instead of being a team that says like, well, I don't want to touch that because that's not my responsibility. So you end up with people basically, instead of trying to do more, you try to do less because you say, I can't do that. It's not my job. So pass it on. And then everything's disconnected. And as Yacin said, and as you guys said, like, it's, we have a responsibility to invest in generating value and helping healthcare professionals and patients, if that's your role, to understand, receive education, and to understand where products can be used successfully. So for me, like, that's why it's really important to try to, whether we call it break down silos or just actually create some like collaborative frameworks so that there's actually some team collaboration going on. I think that's important. And then the other thing on channels is, like, just to build on Yacin's point on like, webinars important early. Absolutely. Like, we need to stop thinking of our channels as these are the channels we have and we just use them at all times, because that's what I see in tactical strategy and
Exactly.
delivery. It's just like the same thing. But early in the life cycle, webinars, there's, whether could use webinars later on, but they might be about completely different things, like probably not really about the product or education. It's just to keep people engaged, maybe in conversation, and to just build trust with the brand. At that point later in the life cycle, it's more about brand awareness. And like some of the more traditional advertising becomes like really important, like just continuously showing people the brand and its association with the product and the patient type on your kind of traditional media buy websites, because then people are just consistently aware of that product and they associate it with the solution. And I just think what I see at the moment is people saying, well, webinars are good, so we should always use them, or banner ads are bad, so we don't use them. That's not true. It's just all about the context. And I think people need to remember that, what are you trying to achieve right now, and what does your customer want to achieve right now, and then marry those two things together. And that's you need to rethink that every year in your cycle, rather than just saying, we have more things that we want to tell everyone each cycle, so we're just going to deploy more things across the same channels every year. That's my view on the, like, probably the key things that need to change, like from a channel deployment perspective and a team collaboration perspective.
Yeah,
it makes total sense. Go ahead, Amish. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna, to your point, you're almost building your little perfect organization there, Dan, around it sounded like you're building almost around a brand, let's say. would you build it around the brand, that your kind of perfect like team there, as you mentioned? Would it be around customer, portfolio, therapy area? How what does that look like from your point of view?
For me, I would build it around a customer. I think that rather than a brand for a start, like definitely a customer or portfolio. I think, say oncology, for example, where you have got specialist therapy areas, but in most regions you're likely to have, and you will have specialists, but in most regions you'll have like general oncologists who cover multiple solid tumor areas, for example. In that case, then the team working should be a large team, and they should be working across the entire portfolio. I certainly do not think that, certainly budget will be spread across the product, but that team would be responsible for understanding how that is spread, because, at the end of the day, like, you have the inconsistent branding, inconsistent channels, inconsistent quality, of content going to an oncologist in a particular region across multiple products, like, is just a weird experience. Like, you need to be able to understand. I would have an overarching portfolio style campaign, lead generation, say webinars, for example. And then based on interactions with webinars and the associated content, I know that this particular oncologist right now is probably seeing more breast cancer patients than they are lung cancer patients. And that's where it's his biggest pain point. Therefore, I'm going to use my lung cancer product customer journey as a focus there. And I'm not going to send other things about breast cancer and stuff like that for now, because I think the general feeling for pharma is, well, we want to increase sales, so why not send them everything so they use both, so we focus on both products. For the customer, they're like, I don't want to hear from Pharma X, I don't know what company we call it, whatever, Pharma, I don't want to hear from them like all the time. And if you're going to send me an email, why don't you send me an email on lung cancer and breast cancer at the same time? So, you know what I mean? Why is it not in the same email if you guys are in the same company? So I think that's the thing for me. I do it portfolio, like customer level, but I think it depends on whether it's like secondary specialist care, or like, it'd be very different. Like, I wouldn't do that with GPs, for example, like, because there's too many products. So then, yeah, like, there maybe needs a different approach, which is a bit more complex. How do you handle, say, GP audience across multiple brands? If you're gonna, who owns GPs? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know the answer to that. Who says, like, we have like 50 brands that are creating content for GPs, and we need to make sure that they're not sending an email on the same day, for example. Like, maybe that is you talk about a central omnichannel type role. There needs to be some kind of responsibility there for, or customer experience role for understanding how brands are tailoring their communications to the same customer. I don't know.
Yeah,
Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I was going to say, let's come back to that GP one. I do want to kind of build on that and then throw a question to you, Yacin, which is, say we have that perfect scenario, everybody's working around a portfolio therapy area, but in reality, if you agree with that, but in reality, what I see is people have their own goals, people are kind of measured on their own way, they have their own budgets, and they're doing things based on what they're measured on. And so actually, in that perfect world, how do you kind of create that in the current realities of the world? So practically, how do you think you would make that live inside your company in terms of where you're working, or a similar type of place?
Well, it's a very difficult question because there's a lot to unpack. But the thing is, it comes down also to your organization and who owns the relationship with, because even with those GPs, even if you organize it the way, for example, you describe it, Dan, you still have the challenge of global versus local, because a lot of the initiatives will have to be driven locally. And the thing is, very often on a local level, you have a ginormous sales rep team. You usually have one measly marketeer that's running, because every rep comes with different insights and says, I need this, I need that, I need this, I need that. And there's no one to really orchestrate the channels or support the marketeers with actually providing them the right channels or more content. So I really think that already on a local level, we have, and maybe this will spark some controversy, too many reps. So we should take away some reps, replace them by marketeers, so that actually we can create the right content as well for example, our MCCP. For example, even for GPs, then there will be naturally, or oncologists, a categorization ABC. We expect the A doctors to be seen more frequently, but we don't create more content for the A doctors. So at a certain moment, then the rep runs out of content. He still goes to see that GP because he has to, because that's his target. but to speak probably about the Champions League game of yesterday, because there's not too much to talk about. There's no product messaging going out to that HCP anymore. So that's why I don't have an unambiguous answer, but I think if we look at how we're organized, we need to look at it from a global perspective, but then also from a local perspective. And that's very often where there's a very big mismatch, where even if we organize our global roles in then this innovative way, where we break down the silos, where there's omnichannel roles, centralized brand teams, etc., or portfolio brand teams, we don't necessarily organize it on a local level, because the local level is responsible for their own P&L. They operate however they want, but then the gears don't click together, because we're not at all able to have the same output as what global is expecting. And then you always have these fights between global and local. And again, I wish I had an unambiguous answer and everyone listening now had an aha moment and I was the bearer of truth. But the truth is, I also don't know, but I am genuinely convinced things need to be done differently, and that the rep model has to change a bit. And also, and this is something I often say on LinkedIn, we always model our forecast based on the amount of reps we have, but we don't take any other channels or tactics into account. And that comes down again to your brand planning. How do you do your brand planning? And based on your brand planning, how much output will you need to generate? And based on how much output you will need to generate, do you have enough marketeers and people to orchestrate from a medical and omnichannel side? Because we also very often see personalization, something, to be honest, I'm on the fence with, I don't really believe in. But again, that one poor measly marketeer that then has to coordinate the agencies, I don't think he or she is capable to then generate enough content that can then also be MLR approved for it to actually make an impact and be personalized. I'm not saying we need to generate more content, because we know I think the number is 5 billion spent annually that then is not even getting in front of the HCPs. But actually, how do we then get the right message again in front of the HCP? And sorry that my answer is not super straightforward and that everyone doesn't have an epiphany right now.
I think there's one thing you mentioned there around the one marketer, the example, and many field reps, and basically the marketer almost creating content on demand based on whatever each rep is asking them to do, right? I think a lot of that seems to come down to the fact that segmentation, your ABCs, what have you're doing, it is all based on reps segmenting these customers.
Exactly.
And there seems to be no segmentation beyond that. And so even then, digitally, which acts in silos to what reps are doing, in reality is then using the rep segmentation to then deliver content digitally as well, obviously, and it's all disconnected as well. So actually, do you think before you can remove some of the reps and increase the marketers, do we need to figure out that whole segmentation piece to actually have it be a bit more holistic than just be field-based segmentation? Because otherwise you're just going to have loads of marketers who are still doing content and putting content out there based on maybe historic rep segmentation, for example. I don't seem to think that people know how to segment customers more holistically like that.
That's a very valid point, and I would say it depends, because depending on the market, there's different drivers for segmentation. For example, in an easy access market, if you're a rep, naturally, because you know if you're cunning that this will influence your MCCP, etc., you will probably put HCP that you have easy access to and a good relationship with. You will very quickly mark him or her as a doctor, because you know I need to see this a doctor this many times in this cycle. So I will mark him or her. And in Europe, in any case, we don't have prescribing data. So there's no one that can really check this. And by the way, by the time it comes out, it can just be adapted. That's it. So I do believe that there's also this kind of mechanics that are naturally there. And maybe I will slightly change the subject, but something that you then say very often is also that people and individuals are very busy then in their marketing and medical roles. They just fight from the one deadline to another, that they always need to go to the next thing and then don't have time to think about what they were doing. And this is also then something that for me is linked to the fact that we're then not fit for purpose, and we don't have enough people to then that have the capacity and bandwidth to also go back and do those analysis and see, for example, is the segmentation then the right one? Because did I achieve the messages that had to be delivered to specific HCPs? Did they actually deliver it? And my problem, for example, also with the MCCP is it only focuses on reach and frequency and not on message delivery. We're only measuring, did you send an email? But then if that email is the message that HCP should receive at the level he's at. For example, if we take something like knowledge ladder, should that email be about mode of action or about ease of use or anything else? This is not actually matched anywhere. I know it's very difficult to do, but that's why your rep is very knowledgeable and has the personal relationship. And for me, the rep then is the personalization engine that you would have. But we're not measuring all of that. We're not even trying to measure it. And so we're just seeing, okay, did you send an email? Okay, checkbox activity, onto the next thing so that I can work on the next deadline. So that's a bit my take. I don't know, Dan, what your reaction is.
Yeah, I mean, I think like what I hear a lot of, and it kind of links back to the omnichannel thing we discussed before, is like there's just a ton of fake work, right? And what I mean by that is like there's a lot of people doing stuff, but it's not having any impact, and they're doing it because it's like self-serving, right? So original point, there's too many reps. Why is there too many reps? There's too many reps because reps are not used necessarily, I mean, it's controversial, to generate impact. Reps are used so that we've got more people having more meetings with more doctors and sending more emails, which makes everyone feel like we have good engagement with our customer base. So like, we got to try to understand, I think, one, like I agree, like less reps would make sense. In if I think about the reality for healthcare professionals, like they're super busy, and like what's the value in having a conversation with a rep for the doctor? Like it's not very often. And the reality like is that, you know, reps are not like, they're not consultants. Like if I'm a consultant doctor, like 20, 30 years, I'm speaking to a medical rep, like, and they come into the office and they say to me like, hey, did you know that like you should test your patient like 4 times? And this is it's like, I'm really like, get out. Like, so I can't believe that these interactions, and like, even when the e-details that we produce in our agency, right? And yeah, the product information makes sense and all that stuff. Like, it's just, it feels like everything's should be reactive, but it's very proactive. And some of it's like the unmet need is like, let me tell you about this patient group. It's like, I've been working in this for 30 years. Why don't I tell you about the unmet need? You know, so I think, you know, what are these reps actually doing? And if it's just making calls and like having those relationships, it's not working. And I think first thing is like reduce the number, but change the role, like change the concept from a sales rep who's trying to sell a product to an account manager who is managing the customer's experience, access, solutions to the product and the patient group, right? So then what you've got is maybe less people in a slightly more sophisticated role where they're able to provide solutions. And those people maybe will be more empowered, and the role should include being able to go to marketing and say, look, like I have 4 accounts that I manage. This is their biggest pain point. We need to start creating content and solutions to that. Oh, and by the way, like this is like a doctor who's really like, he's grasped this concept. Why don't you partner with them to make the content, you know? So you kind of change the role a bit and you have less of them. And anyway, I would say if we're doing omnichannel, which in my opinion would mean that we're able to react to inbound relevant requests for information. So i.e. a doctor attends a webinar, we use the example of webinar, attends a webinar about wanting to understand more about the treatment guidelines in X disease, then therefore we know that doctor is interested in that disease, wants to learn more about that disease, and maybe interested in product information. Reps should be going after all the people who interacted with that webinar as their priority, not sending out as many emails as they can to doctors who are literally have no interest whatsoever in the therapy at the moment. So for me, it's like most of those communications must be outbound. Therefore, the role of the rep is basically a lead generator. They use the reps to drive engagement, whereas they should be using marketing to drive engagement. So that's where the wider funnel is. You know what I mean? So it's like more marketing activity with more specific, relevant, and valuable rep activity would be the way forward. You know, based on what we're talking about, like to me, that would be make a lot more sense. And you know, I know we kind of jump into the topics, but I also wanted to talk about the global to local thing, because that's something that winds me up a little bit. And again, I think global teams are getting away with murder at the moment. I don't think they're producing brand campaigns and core assets. Whereas like you guys are supposed to be the top strategists. You should be providing a framework every year based on your knowledge of channels, your knowledge of customer interactions, your knowledge of every individual market, You should be saying, we know we have markets that have this capability, markets have that capability, and then markets have 3 tiers. You should be providing a channel mix, omni-channel tactical deployment strategy for each of those marketing mixes and saying, this is how we'd advise doing it. We'd advise you use webinars. We have, these type of email assets. You have a website, and we're going to prepare you with some content, some core content that works across these channels. And then, that allows then the marketing teams to be a little bit more flexible with the content, but it gives them more, they have more available to them. They have a deployment plan, not just a load of key messages and an e-detail and a poster that they then adapt. I honestly think it's pretty nuts, what global provides to local teams, given the amount of budget that they have and the responsibility that they have at the moment. I rarely see any brand managers at a global level saying, hey, do you know what, here's your kind of omni-channel deployment mix based on our knowledge of your market that you'll be able to use to deploy all your content, and even a calendar. You should start here. Like you said, Yacin, earlier, it's okay, we're saying we're launching, right? So webinars is the big thing for us. So what we've done for you is we've created a omni-channel pathway for webinar to rep engagement to website, and we're giving you the core assets for that. And now you can maybe tweak the themes of your webinars a bit to work with your audience, but you're still going to use the same pathway. They don't do that. They just give the messages and the big creative, and then they do global conferences.
Yeah,
I think.
Well, so yeah, I mean, so again, a lot there to cover. There's a few things I was trying to almost link to there. So I'm going to slightly defend global a little bit. I don't often do this. I'm going to slightly defend global there and kind of link it back to the whole talk about webinars at a local level, let's say. So I think all too often I've seen where people are measuring their activities very much without the full information. So like we talked about earlier, webinars don't work, let's say, because the success was that to get how many attendees we have, right? That was the success metric. And then, but people aren't looking further into, okay, yeah, this was the topic of the webinar, and this was kind of in this place of the, let's say, adoption funnel or whatever you want to call it. And then none of that was tagged correctly as well. And so you weren't inviting the right people to it, first of all. The topic was wrong. The way you sold the webinar was so broad that no one knew why they would come to it. So all of that, none of that data was there at a local level. It's been measured incorrectly. It's been written off as a channel. And so your point, linking back up to global, in terms of global should know exactly what's going on in all these countries and have insight into what's working, what's not. They don't, because actually, first of all, the local countries don't even know themselves because they're not looking at it. But then also they're vocally probably not sharing with global, because I think I've been as a local country. I've been in both roles, local country and global. As a local country, you don't really want to tell global what you're doing. You kind of don't want the eyes on you. You want to just do your own thing almost. And global don't push it as much either, unless they're with some of the key markets as well. And then they kind of just hear what they want to hear. And then again, with global as well, I think the way they're measured again, like I mentioned, I've been in a global role, is kind of like the accountability for content that gets delivered for them is the delivery of that content. It isn't even reuse. No one, while people are looking at reuse rates, no one is really held accountable. I think local markets are held more accountable than it should be equal, to be honest. So that's kind of what I've seen there in that perspective. So yeah, a few things there that I was kind of thinking about. I don't know, Yacin, you're kind of nodding along there as well.
Yeah, I was nodding along because I don't necessarily agree 100% with what you said, Dan, even though there's a lot of truth in what was said, because I do see still global as the strategist, like you said, but also the overall content provider based on those strategies and the insights that are generated on a global level. However, then indeed we have an issue with the localization. Everyone is aware of it, but no one is held accountable for now. But I do believe it starts with the brand plans, because the brand plans very often, it's a monstrous exercise, but the only thing that happens is everyone puts a timeline. They say at this point of time, we will have this activity, period. They don't say, and that's something I'm advocating a lot for, every activity you do is about driving change in behavior, ideally, or change in mindset, in share of voice, in thought leadership, in lead generation, whatever metric you put against. And we don't actually say what we want to achieve with a specific activity, from creating a global, for example, content pack or content distribution, or however it's called in any organization. And then we cannot even measure, except the fact that it was localized, what the impact was. And therefore we live in we're blind to what change we want to drive. And it doesn't even start with insights. Ideally, what you want to do is you have your global insight. You see that, for example, there's a specific attribute of your product that is only understood by 32% of HCPs. You then say in your brand plan, I want at the same time next year that at least 55% of HCPs understand this concept. I create a global content pack for this. I ensure that this global content pack is localized. And then I can measure through my insights again, my Thermo or whatever you're using, if that specific aspect or product attribute has increased. But we're not even doing that. We're just looking at where gaps are. Then we all look at each other and not, yes, we have a problem. We create content. And we don't look when that content can be localized as well, because we all know that, for example, in France, if you have branded content, that will only reach the HCP after 6 months because of the local regulations. In the UK, for example, due to ABPI, maybe the way you need to communicate that specific message has to be tweaked. But in the global brand plan, we don't say what we want to achieve. And in the local brand plans, we also don't say how then we want to achieve something based on insights. So that's why we keep saying we're data-driven, data-obsessed. I made a post about this today, that sometimes you should also go and understand why something is not working. But for me, that's really a fundamental problem. And that's why this global to local is not working, because we're not measuring the impact of it, long story short.
Yeah. And local to global isn't working either, right? So I know I'm trying to be like a little bit, pushing the conversation, because that, global can't do that unless they get the data. Some data are also from local countries, and local needs, like sometimes it even starts local. Like, okay, you start with your kind of global concept and idea, but then you also need the local needs to communicate. And Amish, to your point, why is the culture environment not there for that open conversation? It's like people don't want to do it because you don't want eyes on you. Why don't you want eyes on you? Like, is it because of like judgment or the fear of like how you communicate data? It's like I see this come across over and over again, is that and maybe the reason why we say we're data driven, but once stuff is done, we don't look at the impact because we're afraid to report bad outcome. So because that's what we do, is we're data obsessed, and we use that data to critique performance of teams, departments, and individuals, instead of using data to influence next decisions and optimize. Like, the culture of data is one of fear, because if I make a mistake, I will be blamed potentially. I don't know, rather than if I don't achieve my target, like, I'm celebrated for communicating it and saying how we'll fix it. It's like, if you spent loads of money on a webinar and nobody came, like, that's just like a bad result. But it should be something's going wrong. What is it? We've understood, we've optimized, we've changed. You know what I mean? What it is that's what's going wrong. Like that I don't know if that's like plays a role in this whole global to local like collaboration and back and forth. Like, is there some kind of culture issue that needs to be solved? I don't know.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Amish. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I mean, I think what you're talking about, which is fundamentally everything we're talking about, it is just down to people, isn't it? In terms of what people's motivations are and all of that. And I was almost like internally laughing as you're talking about the data that people do share and demonstrate is always the stuff that makes you look good, right? Which is ironic, because all the data that we use from clinical studies and all the stuff we put into our materials has to be fair and balanced instead of cherry picking data. Whereas exactly internally, what we're doing is cherry picking data to make ourselves look good. So that's kind of what I was thinking. Yeah.
But actually, there's easy solves for that as well. And something I'm a bit frustrated with at times, but that's also, I was a project manager before, is why don't we have templates that everyone fills in for any campaign? Very often, everyone uses whatever PowerPoint they want to come and report at cycle review meetings or whatever. So you tell the story you want. While if we come up with a global framework, there's, for example, with a race model, to take the webinar, how many people did you reach? How many of those people acted? How many converted? And then for every step, you know exactly why something didn't work. For example, if the reach is not high enough, you can already know that not enough people will register. But why is it not high enough? Are not enough reps sending the emails? Is our first party mailing list not big enough? Is our first party mailing list actually, do we have too many bounce backs? But even like global measurement frameworks is not something we traditionally in our industry really use. Everyone comes up with their creative agency PowerPoints that look great, but sometimes it just comes back to fundamentals. We have templates, we use templates, and that's how you do problem solving. In manufacturing, for example, it's ruthless. You have specific templates, everyone fills them in, problems are reported immediately, and if action from management or whoever is needed, it's very transparent. Because why? In manufacturing, if your production line stops for 60 seconds, you know every single employee there is paid. It costs you 50, 60, 80, 120K per minute. So you can be assured that a lot of people are paying a lot of attention. But for us, I don't know why, even like analyzing our issues with basic things like global templates, global measurement frameworks, etc., is not something we're capable of doing for campaigns. And it's easy to implement. It's really not that hard.
Yeah, I actually love that idea as well, and I'm just taking a note. I think we should go away and make that template, and then first of all. But then the other thing is, I think I'd love to see. I do see it in pockets. Is actually with that template or whatever that looks like for that person, actually have the targets in place before you even implement it. So actually, because if you have that template and you're only looking at it afterwards to say, okay, this was our reach, but actually, what was success? Actually, the number might be low, but actually that could have been quite successful because that low number is the right people. So actually, what was the target before you even implement, and then come back to that template to fill out the results? Because I think this is where it goes wrong. People have different expectations of what success means across the business, and so either a project might fully get pulled completely, the budget gone, where actually it was really successful, but actually someone cold looking at the numbers who has no idea or expectation of what success would have meant just thinks, oh yeah, that was rubbish. I'm not surprised we pulled the budget. And I've had that instance before where, a project was so good. Once it got pulled, actually all the customers, the healthcare professionals were talking about what happened to it. Like it was such a useful resource and all of this. And actually it made the whole thing worse by having something out there which people are getting value from. But internally it looked like they weren't. And then suddenly pulling it actually left a bit of a hole for the HCPs, which actually then ruins the trust element as well. So I think people setting targets would be great, and then setting the expectation more widely around, okay, what success means before then coming to measure and report on it.
It's a great idea. I think like then it also comes back to that team and that collaboration again, because, you also need to be able to react. And, so if, you've got your core KPIs, standardized KPIs that everyone comes and reports, say locally, you come and report, like, I know, your sales data, your interaction data, I know if you're talking about adoption ladder, for example, would be a really good one. Proportion of customers at each stage of adoption, percentage wise in a pie chart, like how do you turn that dial? If it's at a launch stage, how many new consents do you have compared to your target, etc. You have those core things in place. The problem is at the moment, based on the way that the brand plans work, is like, this is the activity that we're going to do in Q1, Q2, Q3, and it's very like campaign based. It's like, we're going to do these activities. And then we have some data coming out in Q2 and we're going to do these activities. What you don't allow time for in the plan is to respond to the impact that you had in Q1. So, for example, we're not all our clinicians are stuck at adoption stage 3, and in order to reach our market target, we need them to be at stage 4, using the product more confidently in a different patient population. But you don't now have any flexibility or time, because you all these other things that you're going to do with the new data, to adjust what you're doing in order to change that impact. So we also need to be able to build that in, which it comes back to that team structure again, and the cycle process. So after each of those meetings, whether that's quarterly, monthly, or whatever, you then need to be able to readjust your plan and actually be able to create and deploy content or change your campaigns or your lead generation process. The reason I think that can't be done is because we don't have a always on process. Like, so typically you don't have like, this is how we generate leads, this is how we convert sales, this is how we support customer growth in activities that are always on. It's all like standalone specific projects that are delivered. So I think that's the issue. And I think the reason why nothing's been done about it, and I didn't really think of it properly then until Yacin said, like, oh, in automotive, like, if you have an issue with the production line or something goes wrong, it can lead to hundreds of £1,000s per minute. Well, the issue is, I think that Pharma does not have this issue. Like, what the commercial teams are doing arguably has so little impact on the prescribing habits of actual doctors that not achieving your goal with your webinars and your activities that you've invested in may have such a little impact in the overall prescribing habits of the clinicians over the short period of time of which you measure it, that it doesn't matter because the company's still making profit. The company's not losing a lot of money. And so no one is saying like we desperately need to change this situation. And that's why I think just generally in pharma, I've similar conversations go on for 10 years. Where it's like we need to be better at doing this or do that. Well, we don't do it because we're still making a ton of profit. Everyone's making a lot of money and everyone's very happy. But clinicians are disengaged and don't trust, the brands. But from a shareholder perspective, does that even matter if the profits are still good? So I don't know if the reason for things not moving quickly or people not being able to be flexible or like changing the structure of teams or stopping the sales rep model, because everyone's kind of sitting pretty quite comfortable in their positions where all this works well for them. And we don't have do we have a big problem with sales in pharma typically? I don't know. So maybe it's different, biotech and stuff, startup, when you're in a situation where you're hoping for some investment or you're a small company, things are very different. You got a lot of competition and there's a lot of money at stake and you've spent a lot on your research and your development of team and brand building, and you've got to actually get those first patients. That's I think I don't know if things work differently. I've not been, you typically an agency situation, a company that doesn't employ a big agency to do all of their work like that. Certainly not from a strategic perspective. So I don't know if it's different in biotech than you might see in pharma, but I suspect that's why things don't change.
No, it probably is, Dan, but I don't know there again if I see eye to eye with you, because I do believe that the commercial impact is real. You see that in studies that, for example, if a specific brand doesn't do their launch in a good way, that actually they lose easily up to 15% of market share and more. And you can also clearly see there's, for me, two big examples. One American company starting with the A and one starting with the R, where a common LinkedIn poster worked previously. I will not cite the companies themselves, but they do a really good job commercially and in communicating their messages. They're really out there. They have very strong commercial teams, and you can also see that commercial success. To be honest, maybe this will sound a bit fluffy, but for me, the commercial success comes secondary in terms of monetary value, because I'm not a shareholder, but because my mission statement is, again, for specialty care, getting the right treatment for the right patient, because the HCP makes the best prescribing decision possible. And so with that in mind, while there's not always a one-to-one relationship of I did this activity, so I can see this output, and especially immediately, let's not forget, especially in specialty care, people with chronic diseases, you have to make a prescribing decision for the next 5 years. So an HCP will not easily change the treatment that a patient is on, but still, we need to get that message in front of the HCP, and I do believe that commercial teams really can make a difference there. However, only, and that's really something I want to emphasize, if you do it in a continuous way, and that's where thought leadership is an important one, and very, very, very few companies actually achieve thought leadership where they can really own one specific domain and are really the big leader in it. I can only think of 4, but that's how you can actually make a long-lasting impact, because all of your touch points, whether they're global, local, and whatever channel they are, communicate a specific key message that is then understood and owned by that company or product, and that is understood by all HCPs. And that's where, then coming back to Omnichannel, you need to make sure that all of your touch points are orchestrated in such a way that you communicate the same message. And what we see now, maybe coming back again to one of my big frustration points, the global to local disconnect, is I go to a global congress, I see specific messaging, specific papers, but then when I go back to my local countries, even if it would be allowed by the regulations, I only get to see that content 1 year later, 6 months later, 1.5 years later, and it doesn't help me in my prescribing decision as an HCP. And that's why we also need those brand plans to be as synced as possible, because those HCPs don't live in a vacuum where they're only exposed to specific UK content or specific global content because they travel to a specific global conference. And that's where I really see that the commercial teams can make a difference if they are able to communicate those key unique attributes of the product that then help the patient and then have a benefic results in terms of sales or prescriptions.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. I think both valid kind of arguments from both of you. I think it feels like there's a bit of a middle ground there in terms of actually there is definitely impact that commercial teams make, but there's probably a lot of wastage of money as well, in terms of, because it's just like you just don't know what the impact is making. And I was starting to think about a conversation I heard from something I heard from a healthcare professional last week actually, which made me think about maybe how the profits could be used in a better way. So I heard a healthcare professional say last week that he basically just didn't prescribe and also advised pretty much anyone that he influences himself not to prescribe a specific drug because of the sustainability impact and actually of that, the manufacturing process of that brand, but also the company kind of lack of I guess now since when it comes to environmental impact and sustainability goals. And so I wonder whether there's a place where profit could be used better for companies, and actually that can add to maybe some of those changing behaviors, because as we know, more people care about the environment, more people are coming up in terms of different generations and their values are a bit different. So it's a bit off topic, but yeah, it's I was just maybe think about those profits in terms of maybe there's a better use of them, because actually people are taking into consideration what companies are doing outside of the product itself.
I think it's relatable because we have impact, commercial activity happens and there is impact, and it's like at the moment it's trying to understand why and where that impact is coming from. And we've talked about reps, for example, but where is all that impact coming from? That delivery of, like, that constant awareness and delivery of message, like, is that coming from reps? Is that coming? It's going to be a combination of a lot of things: the global conference, the local webinars, the banner ads, the emails, the activities. But I think the issue is that because we're not necessarily measuring impact very well, and we don't have those standardized KPIs, and we're not necessarily always measuring, like, okay, we got 6 leads, like 2 turned into conversation, 1 started prescribing the product, and it all started here. Because of that, we're like, okay, well, we know activity. If we know activity works, we know that our sales stay if all the activity carries on. If the activity stops, sales go down. But we're probably spending more than we have to. Like you said, Amish, is that middle ground, is there's probably wastage. And so if we can better start to think about the impact that everything's having, connect the channels, like the webinar to the rep meeting to the sale, or whatever, just try to connect that a bit better, report a little bit better, and be open about failures. And then we probably start to see those gaps. And it's like, you might identify that the I know, just even at a very specific level at a global conference, the symposia are the major source of education, just say, and posters. And you may find that the exhibition booth adds very little value for some reason. And so you might stop producing content on the exhibition booth and just have coffee and some tables, and that'll save a lot of money. And maybe that money could go into something, like you said, like something a little bit different that would, maybe a piece of research around, like, clinicians' experiences, or, like you said, talking to people and going, I didn't realize sustainability was something that we should be even concerned about, some kind of communication around that. So to me, it comes down to, like, I think, and we talked about people having no time and just running on to the next thing. So you're going to, by doing impact, you could do less activity, spend less money. There's more to invest, whether it's ethically or more solution focuses for healthcare professionals. The people in the roles are just not running on that treadmill anymore, and they're feeling some satisfaction out of their job. And I think we'd be in a little bit of a better place, because I do think it's too much. Like, there's because I made that comment about, the commercial impact isn't great, because I just see so many examples where I'm not sure the value of the things that are being done. And exhibition booths is one of them. Like, yeah, some people get it right, but a lot of the time, like, there's no lead generation, there's no measurement. It's just a lot of money. And most people on the booth are, like, having business meetings, or it's doctors who are, maybe it's clinical trial stuff, which is an indirect benefit. But it's just trying to understand, like, what are the big tickets that are costing a lot of money, not having impact, that could be purposed elsewhere. As I said, it's like it's hard to know what that is, because we only measure one big thing, which is profit and sales, and then, like, vanity metrics, and there's no connection in the middle.
Actually, I could speak about congresses for probably 4 hours then, and Amish, because it's one of my big loves, congresses. I do believe that congresses can have an impact, but I'm also convinced that most congresses today generate zero impact because they're done in a wrong way. The analogy I use internally, and we're going through a change and people are understanding that more and more, but it takes time. I've been on this for the last 3 years, but the analogy is a congress can be two things. It can be a fireworks show where you blow all your money on the congress, you have a big booth, loud messaging, symposium, and then the show is over. Or, for example, another approach is, yes, it is a fireworks show, but you also spend some money in production of a video so that people actually can watch that fireworks show at home. Or you completely change the way it's done and you make it a drone show that's scalable. So you invest once, you also have video, and then you can actually go and do that drone show everywhere. And something that unfortunately is not understood at all is that not everyone is coming to a congress, even like the global congresses where you have 6,000, 7,000, 10,000 HCPs coming. That's in the best case, you have 10% of your target audience. And actually, you need to spend your money differently, where, of course, you have a pre, peri, post journey. The pre is to make sure that people know you're at the Congress, what you will speak about, that actually, if you have a symposium, people add it to their agenda. I don't remember the exact percentage, but I think like 65% of HCPs define their agenda before going to a Congress. So then your vanity sponsorships with the KOLs, ensuring that you have a symposium at the Congress is not what drives people in that room. And then how do you, for example, make sure that the symposium that you had there reaches the HCPs that could not make it to a Congress? Do you transcribe this into an article? Do you make a podcast summary of 5 minutes? Do you make a video recording? I know from experience that 1 hour and a half video recordings don't work that well. So we need to change approach. Where do you host it? Do you, for example, have a sponsored article on Medscape? Do you have a HEP portal link, etc.? But all of that needs to be orchestrated, and the deliverable is not going to a Congress. To be honest, that would be my key message to everyone. Spend less money on square meters, and please make sure that your budget spread is also thought of as pre, peri, post. So in your brand plan, it's not a line, we will go to ESCO or whatever Congress. It is, we will spend this much on the Congress itself. We want to achieve this many lead generations or conversations, KOL interactions, etc. at the Congress. You can actually, if you did enough Congresses in the past, even calculate more or less how many touch points you will have. And then again, depending on the life cycle you're in, are you going there for share of voice? Are you going there for lead generation? Are you going there for thought leadership? But then again, thought leadership fits in a sustained engagement, something you do long term. Or are you going there for lead nurturing to see the HCPs that you already see day to day, but then in a different context? And is it a unique opportunity, for example, to show a Dutch HCP who can normally not have access to abstracts, to show him a poster where he actually has data that could actually benefit him, again, in making the best informed prescribing decision. Yeah, congresses is really a very, very big topic, but the way we're investing in congresses, there's very few companies that do it well. I took pride that we were doing it right before, and now I'm on a journey of doing it right again, hopefully.
Yeah, I love that. I don't know if you were smiling for the same reason as I was, Dan, because we talked about this recently for, I guess, applying it to webinars and whatnot. But it's the same blueprint, essentially. It's making the most of that and really stretching it out. And we linking it back to what you said earlier, if you do less things really and think about them well and do them impactfully, actually, you could almost make a congress. Like you could dine out on that for like 6 months and really provide value to a lot of people, whether they're there or not there, and create so much content just from the Congress activity before and after, and then continue on that journey as well.
But you guys are doing a great job, if I may, Dan, sorry, and Amish, because I know you guys are at the next Pharma Summit. I know Gaurav is, I know Nico, but besides that, I don't see any of the other speakers that really actively posted or made a pre-journey, making sure that there's engagement, that people will attend their session. So again, by your activities, you actually generate added value for also your session, the one you will have there. Your names, your brand awareness, your share of voice is higher compared to the others. So it does work 100%. And we can also see it in those examples.
And I think to that point, it's like, if I think about it from my perspective, when I'm at one of those conferences, I'm not that bothered, about just those people in the room and what they only get from that experience. I'm hoping it's going to be enjoyable and it's pleasant for those people. They're going to get a close interaction. They're going to be like probably the best advocates for what you're talking about. But the biggest opportunity from the event is to take them on a journey, right? Like it's no use whether you're a pharma company or you're me as an individual. There's no use giving up your time or spending your money to go to a conference and give people free information and then they walk away and never see them again. What's the point of that? It's literally pointless, So it's, if you were doing like you mentioned, Medscape, right? If you were doing something on Medscape, like, again, there's not much value in just doing something and not having any link to anything else that you do, right? And the conference is you're at the conference because loads of your audience are there. Just like if you do a media buy, you're there because your audience is there. Depending on what your goal is, if it's only to communicate a message, Medscape makes sense if it's there all year, but the conference is only there for 1-2 days. So you can't communicate that message. So you absolutely have to invest in depth. I like that. Don't invest in square meters, but it's got to be in the depth of the content that you produce afterwards, or at least the leads, or at least at a global level. Are you able to capture those individuals from different countries and push them towards a local campaign structure, that generates impact afterwards?
If you think
see it.
If you
I
think
don't
about
see it
it,
very often.
no, and that just made me think a little further as well. Like, even those people that are there at the conference, let's say, or the congress or whatever, it's a 2-day event, 3-day event, whatever it is, the amount of things they're exposed to, the amount of information.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, those people that are even in the room, have they even taken anything in, or were they just thinking about what time's lunch and whatnot? And so you kind of need to take them on a similar journey, even though you may think they're super engaged, but they might have just been not really in the room at all, or it's drowned in so much information that, yeah.
You have to assume not, I think, and you have to assume that, the reality is, like, you will have been to conferences yourself if you're in pharma and you go and you use activities. You probably go to some sessions. How long do you retain that information for? Not like, you go to 25 sessions in a weekend, like, you're making notes and stuff. But I think, like, it's those points that are so important for, in events. For me, like, the lead capture process is so important. Whether it's a re-engagement with an existing customer or a completely new one, doesn't matter. But that lead generation, the amount of opportunities there are, especially in a symposium, which ironically is often a medical-led thing, you've got to really think about lead generation, because they're sat there for an hour and a half, and they will sit there pretty much for the whole thing. And every chance there's an opportunity to get a download for an email with an ABC, which one are you, A, B, or C kind of thing. There's a chance for, like, seeing more stuff from this, or downloading the white paper, or sharing the slides with your colleagues, or whatever it is. There's so many opportunities just to get that basic, simple lead capture. I know all the people that attended. I know the specific thing they downloaded and what they're interested in. And you invest in that tailored follow-up that people don't see in the back end, that provides that deeper experience. And, I go to a lot of conferences and I see people do a great job of QR codes and giving me slides and stuff. The amount of stuff I got for free from companies, like, not stuff like, not pens and stuff, but, actual content I got for free from companies by being in symposia. Never got a communication again. I never even had to put in any details. In fact, you just give me a splash page and let me have it.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's not something that is industry specific. I think, for example, many of us have renovated a home at some point. You want to get educated, you go to one of those congresses where you see who can isolate your home the best or put solar panels. The very few of them, actually, again, they invest massively in the booth, but you never get a follow-up. And that's where, in our industry, we also need to know, if we have a symposium about a specific topic, how does that journey continue on a local level? Because again, that's where actually the relationship and the messaging happens. Of course, we can build a global one to still expose the people that were there, or like people who have an international allure can be exposed to. But a lot of that information doesn't have to stop there. And you cannot, again, speak about a specific publication and then not mention it on a local level, because you need to repeat the message 7 times, allegedly, for people to remember it, to be impactful. And if we don't do that, even though you had people in the room, as you said, they just forget about it. And what was then the impact of the symposium? And again, there's a mentality change. I do believe that it's happening slowly, at least in some organizations. People come to the realization that congresses are expensive and that we need to use them in an effective way. But again, it comes down to your operational excellence. And do you even have a race framework for your congresses. Again, symposia, how many people did I reach with an invitation? How many acted on it? How many actually were sitting in the room? And then when they were sitting in the room, how am I engaging with them afterwards? And does that happen? Yes, no? Do you have content for that? Do you have even just one pager? Do you have a leave behind? Same for the booth. I see so many booths where no one is scanning the attendees. No one is actually counting the amount of interactions they have. And the only metric for success is how many coffees did we distribute? And then they pat themselves on the back because they had the best coffee at the Congress, but everyone is saying they had the best coffee at the Congress. And so we're not going to a barista Congress. We're going to a scientific Congress where it's about scientific exchange and making sure that people actually get exposed to the scientific information or the key messages of your product. Once again, I know I'm repeating myself, but to make the most informed prescribing decision possible.
And I think that was that when I sort of was rude about global, that's what I kind of meant in some ways as well. Like, it's not enough to say like we've created a Congress experience. It's not enough. What they should be doing is saying we've created a conference experience and we've created a process, a omnichannel process through which the people that we engage with at that conference will be able to generate impact at a local level. That's what they should offer the markets. And then the markets will benefit from that global conference because they'll be like, oh, as a result of that conference, our key accounts that were there got this. We got some content marketing that we can use locally for on-demand stuff, which generated 7 or 8, 9 re-engagements from key accounts. And we can report that as a result of that conference at a local level, we ended up with, 65 rep meetings. I'm just make a number up. 65 rep meetings. And of those 65 meetings, 6 months later, we've seen a 50% change in prescribing habit from these doctors. Like just trying to tie some basic stuff. And all you need for that is like, you're already doing, there's some cool experience at conferences. It's all right. Some of the stuff's good. Coffee's good. But like, if you get just the lead generation, all it takes is like, a local welcome email or reminder email of 6 key emails that can be localized that for every lead at a local level, they get 6 emails that reinforce some messages and provide some content about, say, the topic of the symposium or whatever. And, just some kind of, if you've got some CRM expertise, some kind of notification system for a local rep to know that their customer might have opened and engaged with one of those emails so that they can then follow up and say, oh, I noticed you engaged with this email about mechanisms and whatever. And so I have some more information with that I can share. And that results in a meeting. Like, I know like there's going to be huge drop-offs. The numbers aren't going to be super impressive, but you're going to start measuring it and you're going to start going, well, we've got loads of leads, but we've got no rep meetings. So that means there's a problem with the email welcome. So we got loads of click-throughs, but only one of the emails. Let's try and see if we can take that email and replicate the positives about that email and the rest. At least you're starting to connect things. At the moment, if you don't provide that framework and that plan for the deeper engagement, you only provide the shiny stuff at the surface at the conference, then you're not empowering anyone later on,
Yeah, but if I may there, Dan, because what you're talking about, I agree with it 100%. Although it's already a bit advanced, we know that that's how it should be. I'm 100% with you. I don't even know why we're not there yet, in honesty, in 2024, but that's a different debate. However, it also just comes down to very basic things. If you speak, for example, and it comes back to brand planning. If you speak about, for example, the 5 years data or 6 years data or whatever data is available at the Global Congress, you should also have a continuation of that on a local level, or at least the possibility for it. And then I know that in most markets, you cannot speak as advanced as the global level on a commercial side. However, you can, on the medical side, reactively still give information. And if someone asks, hey, I saw this at the conference, have the MSL go and actually continue that conversation about the data that was presented at the Congress. And this is not to drive prescriptions or anything. This is legitimately because the HCP saw something that they were triggered by, and they want a continuation of this. However, even that sync between the global and local plans and the content that will be available at that point of time is not something that happens. And then you're exposed to a great message. You want more information as an HCP, but you don't even have the possibility to actually engage on that. So it's also just comes down again to your planning and will the content that is available at the global level, can we do a continuation of that on a local level?
Yeah, and you
Yeah,
can't do that if you start just 6 weeks before.
Exactly. And that's often how it goes. Absolutely.
yeah. No, even linked to that point as well. And I think even if you can plan it and you have that good intention to do it, I think a lot of people aren't even doing it 6 weeks before. They're only thinking about these things after the Congress has happened or the webinar has even happened, and they're planning, okay, what do we do now? And then by the time they do something 6 months down the line, and kind of the hot topic or whatever was being discussed is too late. Everybody's moved on, and you've just basically not created enough impact out of the one activity you planned for ages and spent loads of money on as well. So yeah,
Absolutely.
timing and planning is, yeah, I think that's the key thing, and it comes down to people again and their own goals. I think is fundamentally, I think everything we're talking about is people and what their motivations are for doing what they do, um, and how open they are to collaborate with other people. Some people just want to kind of come in, do their thing, and get out. Whereas some people truly, and I can see that come through from you, Yacin, in terms of the impact you want to make in your role is very clear, and that's not obvious everywhere.
Also, again, the question is, are we fit for purpose? Because at a certain point, some org charts were designed years ago. We restructure every 2 years. But actually, to what goals are we restructuring, and are we organizing the teams? And I do believe that there's a clear gap. I don't have the answers. I do believe we have part of the answers. We discussed some of them. Like, for example, having brand teams that have the different disciplines that organize portfolio level. Not that we have anything against reps, but actually changing the way reps interact and have more marketeers rather than reps. But between then the planning and the execution, there's a gap. And I also don't know why that gap is there, and why we don't have organizations that are necessarily fit for purpose to achieve those goals as well. Because those goals are not necessarily always clear, or they're very, very ambiguous. So that's something I'm still struggling with today. And I didn't find the answer yet.
Yeah, I think regardless of even restructures, I think it's common. I did it myself. Like, people change roles every 18 months, 2 years
For example.
themselves, regardless of restructuring. And I think everyone seems to want to create some sort of legacy in that 18 months and 2 years. So they'll come in straight away and just be like, oh yeah, the person before me didn't know what they're doing. I'm going to do something different and completely change things just for the sake of changing things. And if that keeps happening, then really just resetting all the time. So I think we need people of that mentality where actually there is just one vision you're working for, and just know that you're playing a part in that journey towards that vision, versus having to create your own whole legacy, which is different to everybody else. I think one of the best jobs I had personally was where I came into a role, and I had that mindset of actually, yeah, like whatever's been in place already is quite good. I don't need to change things just to make a name for myself. Actually, first of all, I can make my job much easier by doing what's already been done because it's proving successful. Maybe there's some fine tuning I could do to make it even better, but actually, it's fulfilling for me. It's creating impact, and I know that I'm playing my part in a bigger picture. So I think we need to see more of that as well.
Yeah, makes total sense. Yeah, 100%. But again, how to achieve that? That's the not million but $1 billion question, if not more.
I mean, it's probably culture and purpose. I think
Also,
it has to be that, and that's going to have to come, from the top. I don't know. Like, I think it's amazing to me because I often think that pharma companies, like, the public impression of pharma is, traditionally there can be like a lot of perception around profits and shareholders and making money and out of healthcare,
That's what you
which I
said
think
earlier,
is a
wasn't it?
shame. Huh?
That's what you said earlier, wasn't it?
I know, but it's a shame because I think, like, it's weird. Like, you could expect that these brands could be some of the most, like, purposeful and respected and admired on the planet because of the opportunity that they create. Like, health is such an interesting thing because health is so human and important to everyone. So there's a real chance for empowerment, and you see that in other brands. I just see, like, brands that focus on environment and stuff, sense a good sense of purpose in the way that they work. But, like, somehow, like, it's really difficult because there's a mistrust with health and an idea that health is connected to business and profits, and it makes it really difficult, I think, for the industry to create a purpose that everyone gets on board with, including the people within it. So I don't know the answer. I feel like it is about purpose, because with that purpose, if people stay more long term in a role because they want to make, they want to take a drug product through its 5-6 year life cycle and demonstrate success across that. But you'd very rarely see people sitting in those roles for that amount of time. Maybe they would if the opportunities were there to grow within it and to get some reward for the impact you create. But I feel like, yeah, maybe it's just a symptom of what big companies do. It's like that within a big company. I don't know.
You have a very valid point about culture. In our industry, for example, there's a lot of acquisitions, and then after a while, there's so much different cultures that there is none. There's no sense of purpose. Again, because I love my analogies, look at football, for example. You do see that when a very impactful coach or culture lives or reigns within a club, that actually it drives them to success. So you can also see when a bad coach comes, there's a red team right now that's not performing that well, that actually the results are less. So I do believe that culture, purpose, your goals are really what can drive you, and the individual shouldn't even matter. Of course, we all have our ambitions, our goals, etc. But that's my personal way of functioning as well. I want to work for an organization with a purpose and a mission and help them achieve that mission. That's why, for example, on a personal level, I'm not a freelancer, because I want to contribute to something that is bigger than me, larger than me. That sense of purpose can be muffled because of all the acquisitions, the loss of culture, and not having very clear, achievable goals. So that does play a very big role. And there's not that many organizations, except for the big pharmas, and they're big pharma then for a reason, who actually have a very strong culture that they can maintain, and that actually have a one team, one goal approach where everyone is working towards better life for patients. And I once had a CEO who was always speaking about HIV in the 90s, because that's what he did. After a while, he was getting boring with that one story that he was repeating 50 times, but he did have one very powerful quote, and he said, saving lives is addictive. And if you live by, for example, that mission, you know what you're working towards every day, and you can also hold each other accountable of, hey, this campaign or this activity wasn't optimal. It's our duty to actually do better so that the HCP can make the most informed prescribing decision possible. But it really comes down to mission, culture, mission statements, etc. That does play a big role, and it's very often overlooked, but it also sits so high above our heads that we cannot have an impact on that specifically, but it isn't a very important one. I follow you there.
Yeah, I think you mentioned earlier, maybe it's easy, one of those things, it's easy to forget what we're doing if we're in pharma or even working with a pharma company, because we don't spend that much, you posted about it today, you don't spend that much time with healthcare professionals or with patients and really see that in the setting. So I think it's easy to forget. We're bogged down doing loads of things, as we talked about as well. We're just trying to move from one thing to the next, tick off a to-do list, and we forget there's someone at the end of this who really needs this treatment, which is going to either save their life or give them a better quality of life, or cure them potentially as well. So I think, yeah, maybe that's the solution. We need to spend more time out there with patients, with healthcare professionals, versus...
Or bring them in, to be honest, Amish. If you have good programs and good patient advocacy leads, like on a monthly basis or whatever, having in a town hall a patient coming and sharing their story, to be honest, it's always full of aha moments for me personally. And of course, you then read about depression or people struggling with social anxiety or stuff like that. But reading it and hearing that someone was on the verge of divorce because they literally could not get out of bed, they were getting aggressive because they were feeling that badly, that they were losing themselves, is something that is truly impactful. And I once had one of those patients say, thank you, because thanks to you guys, I found my life back. And that's also something we should remember, that those patients are also waiting for us. So maybe, yes, somewhere there's those shareholders expecting then indeed the dollars or the euros coming in, absolutely. But on the other side of the spectrum, there's also patients waiting for treatment solutions. And the reason in theory why the prices of certain treatments are the way they are is because there's a social value that has been calculated that that specific product brings to those individuals and to society. Having someone that is, again, a fully functional member of society is also something that is not to be underestimated, both on a macro level, but also all those individuals with horrible stories of how they got ill at an early stage of life or late stage of life. And already when I have a toothache, it's horrible. So I cannot imagine even living with a chronic disease for years and not seeing the end of the tunnel for 5 years, because you know from your research, that's how long it took on average for someone to get to the right treatment. So that's why, again, I'm repeating myself, so I hope I'm not getting boring, but making sure that the HCPs in part to make the right prescribing decision also will ensure that a potential patient might get that treatment a bit earlier, and their quality of life might then potentially get better thanks to the fact that they got the right information.
I think that process has been proved to work as well. Like, bringing people in, like, and having that positive culture, like, especially from a sales environment. Like, I'm terrible at the details. I'm sure we can figure this out afterwards and share it with people. But I know there was a study in like insurance sales or something where it was, instead of building competition and bonuses, they would bring in, people who had benefited from the insurance, like, whether it was healthcare or whatever. And they would bring those people in to talk to the sales team to say, like, look, this is what happened, and I managed to like benefit from it. And then the people feel more motivated actually to, when they call people up and speak to them, they understand like the emotive, like the opportunity that they can create. And yeah, like, in the end, still for business impact, that's why you're doing it. Like, you're still selling more, but you're selling in a way that is based on your motivation to help the people that you're trying to talk to, based on you seeing the impact firsthand, having people come in and tell their story. That would be a relatively easy thing to do, wouldn't it? Like you said, relatively often patients or clinicians to come in to say how the product has supported them or whatever. And it would definitely give people more motivation, I would say.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, even like people can even take it on themselves. Like you could go online and read these stories yourself. Like potentially people posting on social media. Definitely like bring people in for sure.
Absolutely.
Hearing from someone is great, but I think you can go out there, read these things as well. I think this could potentially even be a solution for like content, getting better content, inspiring content. Talk a lot about storytelling. Yeah, the stories we tell are stories about the product, but essentially not proper stories. So I think even like these kind of solutions here, speaking to patients, going and finding their stories, is what can create inspiring content that's going to kind of what's the word, engage healthcare professionals to actually take notes and take listen to then find out more about the product, to then, if it's appropriate, prescribe that to their patient as well.
Well, sometimes I have difficulties with that, like going and explaining to HCPs what their patients are suffering from. I do know it's an important aspect of what we're doing, but they are the ones seeing the patients on a day-to-day basis. But I do believe that sometimes we need the wake-up call. And for example, if we're at a congress, most of the congresses also have patient advocacy groups there. I would tell to my peers, just go speak to them, book a 15-minute meeting, even though you're not the patient advocacy lead, just go try to listen to a few stories, maybe try to get in touch with them, just for you to better understand what people are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. But actually, I do have a question for you both, if I may, because I did repeat my mantra often, but I wanted to know what drives you guys and what your mantra is, and why you do what you do on a day-to-day basis, and what drives you really to excel at it. I was curious about that. I don't know what to go first.
Yeah, go for it, Dan.
I'll go for it. Well, for me, like, I really believe in trust. I think that, I went to medical school. I didn't become a doctor because I wasn't very good at the practical aspects of it. I was always desperate to be involved in healthcare. And I just feel like, the reason that I was always motivated to be in healthcare was because I think like you really have to have like a strong trust. When you know that feeling of being sick or something's wrong, you don't know, you're Googling, you're panicking, you're stressing, go to the doctor and you've got that trustworthy person that goes, it's actually fine, or this is what you need to do. It's such I don't know if there's another feeling like it, to have like a big stress around your own health and then to have that problem solved. And I've always felt, as I moved into industry, like that I feel the industry should be part of that trust. Just as a clinician provides that trust, authentic relationship with a patient, and someone walks in and can feel relieved from their burden, just in the same way, I feel it would be important for industry to be able to build that authentic relationship with healthcare professionals. So for me, and for we're focused on content marketing, content strategy, and, advertising and things. And it always comes down to the same thing in terms of trying to measure whether that's good enough or not. And it's like, if you put yourself in the doctor's shoes, is this adding value? Is this authentic? Is this enabling me to build trust with the brand or the company that's producing it? If so, then good, we've done our job. If not, then we need to do work. And so for me, that's what drives it. It's like, are we able to create that authentic bond and trust? And that's what I try to focus on all the time, to make sure I'm doing the right thing.
Very interesting. Thanks.
Nice. Yeah, for me, in terms of, I guess my background is very different. I have not come from a medical background at all. And in fact, I kind of stumbled into the pharma industry. I didn't know much about it until I became inside the pharma industry. So starting from sales roles and then working through marketing and various things. I think the biggest thing for me, and I still kind of get this a lot, is I think if I hadn't have joined the farm industry, I think my perception of the farm industry would have been what I see on the media as well, big pharma, profits, etc. So part of kind of what I like to do is dispel some of those myths as well and make sure that we are creating the right impact. And if that means for pharma as well, and I think it does mean in terms of shifting forward, we go towards more using the profits in terms of more preventable aspects of healthcare, and that's a whole other topic and what that looks like. I think that is where most farmers should go, because I think the ultimate goal for farmer is to make people live healthier, longer lives, etc. And yeah, medicines and drugs are basically the last resort, essentially. So if we can get earlier on in the process, I think that's what's kind of driving me to stay in the industry and continue going, as well as dispelling the current myths as well.
Okay, clear. Thanks for sharing as well, Amish. No, but in the end, it's really something fundamental to understand about an individual, to also know, of course, you have your professional goals, but there's always the intrinsic motivation that each of us has, why you're doing the things you're doing, and then what change we want to drive as individuals. Because again, it comes to the power of the individual. That's really something I very highly believe in. Again, football analogy, but you can clearly see when there's one player who's there to win the Champions League, like CR7, he will make sure that everyone has that same common goal. And sometimes, like a very good colleague of mine says, is be the arrow. So I do believe that we need to step up if we have strong convictions and be the arrow, show the way of what we think, how things should change. And that's why I started posting on LinkedIn, because I think things should be done differently. And I thought I should be vocal about this. And even if it only impacts a few, always the same people, it's still good to have that conversation, spark the discussion.
Yeah,
Yes, and I think that's the solution to one of the problems, like you said, is like, how do we solve the culture issue? Well, if you're a leader, the leader in the company, and you have, you want people with that authentic purpose that you described, then the interview process, the onboarding process should be primarily about that, not about skill sets. Like, I have a PhD in this or that, so you're a good medic. Actually, do you have the driving purpose that it should be inherent within every individual? Because if you put collections of individuals together with the same driving purpose, then they will try to achieve their goal. Even if they don't have the capabilities, they will learn them, and they will try and do that. And I think maybe that, it may be part of it, is like, is it within the people that we hire? Are we hiring the right people that have the right purpose, that will stay in a role for long term to achieve maximum impact, that want patient outcomes ahead of profits? Like, if you can't do that without all those people. So maybe that's part of the solution, is the hiring process.
I don't think it's the hiring process. Then, in honesty, I think it's the shaping process afterwards. Again, I love my football analogies, but if you look at Arsenal now under Arteta, he expects excellence from all of his players. He didn't hesitate to even put one of his big shots 3 seasons ago to the side. But he expects excellence every single game. And there's a funny analogy. At a certain point, the team was having a dinner, and he hired pickpockets to steal their stuff, like their watches and wallets, etc. And then he said, look, you lost your stuff because you were not aware, you were not paying attention. It's the same in football. Every second counts. You need to be sharp 100% of the time. You can turn actually then people who are not avid believers, who are not striving for excellence, etc., into people that actually can believe in it. The only thing is, again, then you have this gray zone. Is it HR? Is it business? Who is it? And then it becomes a black hole. But to me, it really comes down to indeed leadership, how you communicate, how often, which core values you install, and do you live by those values? It's not because you send an email once that all of a sudden it's a value. No, it's something you live day to day. And I've been part of, actually, in my career, maybe 1 or 2 organizations only where they did this successfully. And one of them, it was something very basic, but we had our badges, because we're going to the office every day with our 8 core values, and everything we did, even our target setting, was linked to those values. And so it's not about hiring, it's about shaping, because it really comes down to that from my personal point of view, but I'm not the bearer of truth, honesty.
Yeah. I think it's important in terms of that leadership and the environment you create as well, right? So like making sure that people feel comfortable to challenge, because I think people need to challenge.
Also, yeah.
We talked about it earlier, and I don't think we covered it explicitly. Sometimes you ask people like why they're doing certain things, they don't know why they're doing them. So like, well, why are you doing it? So you need people to question the things that maybe they're being asked to do if they don't get it, or fundamentally if they don't believe in it, to say, I don't think we should do this. And so, but you need that leadership and that environment created where people feel comfortable to do that, I think, as well. And I think that's what we need to see more of, I think, to solve a lot of the things we've talked about. It's people just really challenging themselves and each other to say, why are you doing that? What can you expect to get from that? If you don't even know, then just drop it, don't do it, essentially.
And then what do you report on? For example, do you report on profit and P&L, or do you actually report on a number of patients on therapy? Because that's a small nuance, but it makes a huge impact in the way you perceive what you're doing day to day. And again, culture, how you create a culture. Do you have patient pictures in the office? I've been in pharma organizations where you don't have patient pictures in the office, which I always found very strange, because at a certain moment I was at a pharma company with 3 letters and an orange logo, and there were patient pictures everywhere. It was a vaccine department, and you could see what you were working for. It was also global footprint, so you saw people from all ethnicities, and you knew what you were doing was impacting people worldwide. But in the other one, it was just a blank office with gray carpet and boring meeting rooms. And actually, it could have been the Michelin paper company. That's it. Again, your culture is something you need to live on day to day. And I do believe it's one of the big drivers or change drivers for individuals, at least.
Yeah, I love that. So, is there anything else you want to cover? We covered so much today.
Well, there's so much we can still cover, but I think for our first get together, we already covered a lot. Maybe we didn't go in depth on everything, but really enjoyed the discussion. There's a lot of problems we all see. The only reason I'm wondering is why we cannot always solve those issues, because like you said, Dan, for one of them, it's been more than 10 years, or maybe Omnichannel, those classic slides, right message at the right time for the right HCP is something you were already seeing 15 years ago, and then those fantasy journeys. So yeah, if we could cover anything, it's how would we solve this? But I don't think we can cover that right here, right now.
No, I mean, we've probably got a lot of stuff that where we've explored some things, and maybe we have some specific things that we could discuss on each of the ones later. But it's been like fun to just with no like preparation, just to like see where the conversation goes, and that's been pretty cool. It's been really good.